Om Parashakti Namaha. Om Parashakti Namaha. Om Parashakti Namaha. Welcome back to the Awakened Living with Nibodhi podcast. Last week, we discussed the art of creating conscious relationships with ourself, with our beloved, our partner, our community, our family, with the universe. And as I mentioned last week, this week we're going to dive into the Shakti, the sacred, divine, feminine essence of Shiva and Shakti, of that unified field. And again, I'm speaking of the sacred feminine, Shakti, not as a gender, but as the living, breathing, moving energy of consciousness of life itself. It really doesn't matter what gender your form is. If you're a male form, a female form, whether you identify more with one or the other, non-binary, that doesn't matter. Shakti is within you. If you exist, you're Shakti. In the non-dualistic Vedantic view, every incarnated being in creation, in their wholeness, is a perfect union of Shiva and Shakti, pure consciousness and the manifestation, the divine energy. And remember, the image of Ardhanar Ishwar, it's one form that's half Shiva, half Shakti, half masculine, half feminine. And that reminds us that the self is not actually split into two halves. There's a oneness to us. We are one, and we wear the appearance of two. And the universe itself is neither masculine or feminine. Remember, Shiva is the pure awareness, the witness, the unmoving, eternal presence that just observes. That is the presence behind everything. Shakti is what created the universe. It's the creator. It's the dancer. It's the ebb and flow of life. It's the trillions of galaxies colliding, birthing. Everything that happens is Shakti. Without Shakti, Shiva, that pure awareness, has no expression. And without Shiva, Shakti is energy and there's no substratum for it. And it's the beauty of incarnation that in this world of form takes on specific qualities. Shakti has unique qualities, a rasa, a taste, a flavor, her own unmistakable, divine, intoxicating fragrance. She represents the mother, the lover, the devotee, the queen, the fierce goddess protector, and the gentle nurturer, the guru, the goddess, the flowers blossoming in the spring. I love the Vedic culture. I love the tantric culture. And here I'm talking about the higher forms of tantra. Because in the tantric tradition, there's this spectrum of the sacred feminine that is personified in what's called the Dasha Mahavidyas, the 10 forms of the great wisdom goddesses. And each facet or each aspect of that infinite Shakti is represented or experienced through different aspects of life and through these different goddesses. Kali, who is my beloved, governs time and the transformation of life. And she also represents that fierce grace, that fierce compassion, and the ability to destroy the illusions of our consciousness, the illusions of the ego, the illusions that we're separate from anything. She destroys that. She takes it apart. And Tara has many colors and many forms, but Tara is the savior, the savioress, the guide through life's different storms. And she has different colors in the Buddhist and Hindu tradition that represent different aspects of that. And then there's Tripura Sundari, who is all the beauty and the harmony in all the worlds. And Bhuvaneshwari, who is considered to be the cosmos itself, the space, the container, the womb of which all creation came out of. And then there's some more fierce aspects. Chinnamasta, she's seen as a goddess cutting her own head off and offering it to the divine. It's our sacrifice, our self-sacrifice, and our liberation through the act of surrender. And Bhairavi, she is the pure power. She's the power of intensity. She's the raw power of doing spiritual practice, of doing sadhana, of the intensity of life. Dhumavati actually means smoke. It's what covers the illusion, but it's also the remover of the illusion. It's the void when we enter into this state of wisdom, and that comes through solitude. That comes through endings. And so where there's smoke, there's fire, and it's a transformation. And so we enter into this solitude, into this void to transform. Like the caterpillar becomes into the larva, into the cocoon to become a butterfly. Bagalamukhi is silence. It's this stillness, this beauty of stillness and silence, and the silence that ends the wandering mind, the questions. It's, oh my God, it's the silence that ends the negativity within our mind. Matangi is this wild goddess in the jungle, untamed by societal norms. She's the goddess for the outcasts. And Kamala, the goddess of abundance, the goddess of the lotus. She is the lotus flower. She's grace. She's our spiritual divinity, our prosperity. So each of these Mahavidyas, that was just a nutshell. There's books and discourses if you want to study this in depth. But each of these Mahavidyas lives within each one of us, not as archetypes or roles to perform, but these are the primal forces that live within us or lie dormant within us that are waiting to be remembered, to be embodied. It's the Kundalini Shakti that's waiting to be gently awakened with love, with awareness, with devotion. So today's conversation is about Shakti, is about the divine feminine and how she expresses herself, her different incarnations through us, and how that can become distorted when she's forgotten, and how glorious and magnificent we become, how life becomes fully inspired and full of creativity and unconditional love when she is remembered and embodied. So the world has a lot of darkness. It's called the Kali Yuga. And in the Kali Yuga, there's a massive decline in dharma, in purpose, in righteousness, in love and compassion. It's said that in this yuga, there's a 75% decline in dharmic action, and only 25% people are even seeking dharma. So this is the time to awaken. It's never been actually easier because the dark is so crystal clear. A little bit of light illuminates a lot of space. So make this the time, because now is all we have. Make it a time to remember and embody Shakti in all of her manifestations. There's some confusion, I think, in the New Age and spiritual realms and the self-help realms, that embracing and embodying the divine feminine is only about softness and beauty and receptivity. That's part of it, but it's actually about embodying the full spectrum of life, all of our tenderness and our ferocity, and the nurturing and the firm boundaries, and being able to yield when appropriate and embracing your wildness. There's that saying, wild women don't get the blues. Wild people don't get the blues. In Tantra, Shakti manifests in these countless forms. And there's a tantric text called the Sri Lalita Sahasranam. It's 1,000 names of the divine goddess. And in verse 658, it says, Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Swarupini. She who is Icha Shakti, the power of will, the universal will and our will, the individual will, hopefully aligned with universal will. Jnana Shakti, the power of wisdom. Knowledge and wisdom are two different things. Wisdom is knowledge used in Dharma in alignment with universal will. And Kriya Shakti, it's the power of action. It's the power of movement in the universe. Swarupini, her true form. Her true form is the balance of Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, universal will, divine wisdom, and putting that into action. So true Shakti, it's not this passive way of being. While she is deeply receptive, she is a force of nature. I grew up surfing, and the ocean is a powerful form of Shakti because she can do whatever she wants to us. Riding a big wave, she can just take me and smash me on the ocean floor. She can create the most magical flow state on that wave and also crush me. She creates worlds and she dissolves them. I mean, the universe, she births galaxies. Like, we have more than 2 trillion known galaxies, 2.3 trillion known galaxies. And that's supposedly only 3% of what we know of the universe. So she bursts infiniteness. And if we ask her to, she can also destroy the distortions and illusions we have about who we are in life. She can burn them to ash, metaphorically speaking. It's infinite power, Shakti. Used correctly, we can create nothing but unconditional love. And used incorrectly, there's war and destruction. In this modern world, much of the feminine has been conditioned to confuse the worth of a human, especially a feminine form human, with appearance and validation or even compliance. But that divine feminine, that sacred feminine, doesn't live for approval. When she's in her embodied power, she lives from truth. Ask yourself this. Again, it doesn't matter what form you're in, but ask yourself this. When you give of yourself, is your giving born from love or is it born from fear? And is that fear from being unaccepted, unloved? That's what Matangi is about. It's about being wild. You don't care if you're accepted. You don't care if you're loved. Your job is to love. Who you are is love. Like St. Francis said, let me not seek to be understood, but is to understand. Let me not seek to be loved, is to love. And from that, when we do soften, are you softening from an open heart that is filled with love or from some collapsed boundary? And that probably happened in early childhood as an adaptation to get what you needed. And when you shine your light, is it because that's your nature? You've embodied your love light nature, or are you afraid of being unseen and you've used all the Instagram filters to make you appear more light and bright? An embodied and awakening masculine presence feels the difference. So Shakti, if you're really wanting to attract a masculine partner, if they're embodied and awakened to some extent, they feel the difference between that love light or the neediness. He senses not just your beauty, but your life force, your prana shakti. So if that's authentic, he's going to feel that. And that's actually what a conscious embodied masculine really longs for. It's not your perfection. It's your undiluted essence, the embodied presence, the ability to show up in the morning, your hair disheveled with no makeup, and your teeth unbrushed, and your tongue unscraped. That's Shakti. And the feminine's deepest longing for safety is not necessarily about a man or a family or even a community. It's about you holding yourself in love. And can you sit with your own emotions and love them? Can you sit when you're soft and love yourself? Can you sit when you're gentle and love yourself? Can you sit with yourself wild and fierce and unabandoned and love yourself? And can you be with any of those emotions without abandoning yourself? I'm very excited to share with you Real Mushrooms, the sponsor of the Awakened Living podcast. I use their mushrooms every single day because they've genuinely changed my life. I trust them because they have 50 years of expertise and use 100% organic mushrooms, 0 grains, 0 fillers, which are found in most common mushroom products on the market. They use just real, organic, clinically tested mushrooms. Every morning, I use lion's mane to sharpen my thinking. I use cordyceps to give me the clean energy I need for the day. I use chaga to strengthen my immune system. And when stress hits, and it does, I use reishi to bring me back to center. With their products, you actually feel the difference. Through the end of March, Real Mushrooms gives Awakened Living with Nibodhi podcast listeners 25% off their entire first order. Use the code AWAKEN25 at checkout to get 25% off your first purchase. You can find their link in the show notes or visit nibodhi.com/mushrooms to get yours today. So many of these so-called modern neo-tantra teachers are telling women that to be Shakti, to be feminine, is you need to wear silk and move like flowing water and to be endlessly agreeable and surrender to the masculine. That is not Shakti. That is not embodiment. I want to be clear about that. That is not truth, and that is not love. That is toxic masculinity disguised as the teacher, disguised as the sacred, but there's nothing sacred about that. Shakti is not just a gentle stream. She's also the tidal wave capable of massive destruction. She is not just this blooming, blossomed flower in its full radiance and fragrance. She's the sprout. And the sprout started as a seed under the ground in the darkness, and it had to crack, and it grew up. It grew up from the ground, and the roots growing up from the ground were covered at one point by soil, or in the toxic masculine world, by domination. But Shakti is capable of breaking through the concrete and the stone. That little tiny seed, that tiny sprout can break through anything, can break through any wall and any chain. You know, you can have all the Instagram and TikTok followers or whatever social media app there is. You can have all the praise and all the admiration in the world. But if you are abandoning your own truth to keep the facade of beauty and elegance and so-called embodiment, that illusion of peace, your body and your soul will know the difference, and it will know it as betrayal, and your life force will dim. So be honest, like really, truly be honest, and ask yourself, are you capable of saying yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no? Unapologetically, can you show up with no makeup and no AI filters as who you are? And there's nothing wrong with makeup. By all means, wear makeup, no problem. I'm not judging makeup. Makeup's great. But can you show up as you in that? And likewise, are you capable of receiving love without shrinking, and give love without losing yourself in that? Just show up as love in its full embodiment. And can you stand in your own fire without burning yourself down? Now, sometimes that's necessary, like the phoenix. The phoenix dives into its own fire, but that comes from wisdom. That's Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti. It destroys itself in its own sacrificial fire of tapas in order to transform itself into something else, because it knows it's time to grow. Just like the story of the lobster and the shell putting pressure, it's time to grow. But that's wisdom. That's not societal conditionings. And last week we talked about the koshas and the subtle body, and we have chakra systems that I didn't discuss last week. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The root chakra, that's the Muladhara. That is the foundation. That is the grounding. That's the source of real power. That's where Shakti Kundalini is waiting to awaken naturally. That is the source of the creative power of the universe. That's the creative origin. And on another level, that is the birthright to be here. You deserve to be here because you're here. Okay? And who we are in essence is love. And so it's our right to love. And that's from the Muladhara, we move. There's other chakras, but I want to focus on Anahata, the heart, because that's the devotion. That's the devotion to yourself. That's your devotion to the earth, to your family, to your community. And when it's awakened, it's the capacity to love unconditionally, like the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother's love is unconditional. If you've never experienced unconditional love, it's the most rare and profound thing in the world. My guru, Amma, hugs. It's unconditional love. She doesn't care what your religion is, what your path is, if you believe or don't believe. She wants you to awaken the unconditional love in yourself. She wants you to see that you are God herself. And it is our dharma to love and to be loved, but it's not from neediness. And when the Shakti, the sacred feminine, rises from the root to the heart, it's an unstoppable force. Life is going to strip everyone bare at some point. Our relationships may end. Our families' relationships will end. Your crypto or stocks or gold and silver are going to go up and down. They may crash. The children will grow up and leave. The body is going to change. And it's guaranteed that death will come. We're here for a very short period of time. In the expanse, in the hall of eternity, we're here for a very, very short period of time. Death is inevitable. Show up now, show up today, show up in this moment, show up in every breath as Shakti, as love. And as the dance of creation continues and everything changes, because it will, you still know in every cell of your being that your worth is never anything external, that your essential essence is eternal, and that's your worth. Because if we can't trust our own life force, we're going to look outside of ourselves for worth. And in that, we overgive, we overplease, overperform, all of it just to feel safe. These are survival adaptations, and they're necessary sometimes. But once we become aware, they're no longer necessary. They're old, outdated computer programs that are not allowing us to run at the current model's state. That's not the dance of Shakti. Shakti is not the good girl. She is not the endless smiling hostess. She is raw. She's the unapologetic life force. And really, the awakened masculine, in fact, the whole world doesn't need more women who have their divine fire repressed in the name of being nice. The world needs the goddess. The world needs the mother. The world needs Shakti to remember who you are, that you are the living expression of the goddess, of Tripura Sundari's radiance, of Kamala's gentle abundance, of Saraswati's sweet voice and Veena, and Kali's fierce grace, cutting away all the ego and all the BS that's not serving love and light. Women bleed, and they give birth, and they love, and they rage, and it's all beautiful. And each one of those things can happen with equal reverence and devotion, especially bleeding. We have a society where if you're in a feminine form and you have a monthly cycle, that's not honored and respected. You're still expected to go to work, and no matter what's going on. In traditional societies, there was a temple where the women would go and bleed monthly together and pray, and the men took care of the children and brought food and took care of the things and honored that cycle, honored that wisdom, and there was profound grace in that. And it was such a holy, sacred thing. Now it's not really respected at all. We need to bring that wisdom back, that grace back with devotion. And that's power. That devotion is power, but there's danger in unintegrated power, whether it's masculine or feminine, but we're talking about the feminine. There's even greater danger in repressed power, because just take sexuality. It's one of the biggest things in the world. You see it on TV. Like, women are still in 2026 being used to sell products. Their bodies are being used to sell products. Sexuality sells, right? So when sexuality has been repressed, depressed, suppressed, it becomes a distorted form of sexuality, which is what we see in most society, and then becomes guilt and shamed and all these other things. And the goddess's intuition, when it's in balance, is one of the most powerful things in the whole universe. But when that is suppressed or repressed, it becomes self-doubt, and then Shakti can't lead anymore. She's always questioning herself. And any emotion, but when emotions are suppressed, when they're repressed or depressed, especially anger and that wildness, that becomes chronic illness. And we see chronic inflammation and autoimmune conditions on the rise, and especially amongst women. It's because of suppressed and depressed and repressed emotions not being able to express. And it goes down into the cells, and it's a fire, it's a heat, and it stores in the tissue as our issues, and it becomes chronic illness. When that creative fire is shamed or made to feel guilty, if it's buried, if it's suppressed, it's not going to die. It may kill us, but it's not going to die. It goes deep, deep, deep into the shadows of the body and of the being. And that's what's feeding chronic illness. And it also feeds these generational cycles of fear, guilt, and powerlessness. And in last week's episode, I was talking about healing the generational trauma. It becomes, when we become awakened, when we're aware, it becomes our dharma and our karma to deal with those generational traumas and heal it in ourself and in the community and in our family lineages. So as Shakti awakens, she is no longer going to surrender, not from weakness. I mean, she will surrender, but it comes from fullness, not from weakness, not from being suppressed. And that surrender it's different than I surrender the white flag. It's a surrendering to what is. It's an opening to her own self. And she yields and is receptive to authentic love because she trusts herself 108%. And she trusts who she is because she knows herself. And she's whole. Shakti is whole, whether she's in a relationship or alone in the forest. She's comfortable in solitude as much as she is in communion, dancing with 108 goddesses in the forest under the full moon. And your ability to nourish, to inspire, to open life with your presence, Shakti, is directly relational and proportional to how deeply you've met yourself, who you are, in the root. So, but the root of all mistrust between the feminine and masculine, it's not personal, actually. And that's why being in relationship becomes a sacred mirror and a sacred portal to awakening, because that mistrust is ancient, it's ancestral. It carries that cellular memory and that vibrational memory in the koshas of suppression, of silencing, of violation, of betrayal, and of murder. And for so many women, they have the memory of being burned at the stake for loving. So the trauma now didn't begin with the current lover. It was a long time ago, or at least in this life, maybe it began with the father, or, the absence of a father, or the betrayal of a father. So the healing of these wounds is not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's important and it's sacred. Healing Shakti is the most sacred work there is. Remember, in the Vedas, in the Vedic teachings, in the psychology, it teaches that the Shiva and Shakti, again, in essence, they're not two. There's one self dancing. And when that harmony is there, we're whole. And Ayurveda shares that any imbalance in our prana, or tejas or ojas, creates a distortion. Prana is the life force, tejas is our intelligence, the light of consciousness, the cellular intelligence, as well as universal intelligence, and ojas is our juice, our vitality, our cellular immunity and longevity, and that which supports life. So when there's an imbalance to that, any of those, there's a distortion, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But when they're imbalanced, when they're restored, Shakti's dance is a light. It's luminous and it's free. And that's really what a lot of the tantric teaching is about. It teaches that to awaken the full Shakti within is to awaken not only your personal power, but it's awakening the cosmic dance of those Dasha Mahavidyas, those 10 forms of the goddess in each of her divine forms, each one guiding us, guiding you, guiding us through the different aspects and stages of embodiment, of life and wholeness. And again, Atma Vicharya, the self-inquiry, really demands that we look at ourselves and ask difficult questions. But that's what Atma Vicharya is doing. Beyond just who am I, we understand logically that we're the supreme consciousness, but we have blockages set. So we need to do this questioning. And one of the questions that I learned in compassionate inquiry is, when did I first abandon my own truth? That's really important. It probably happened in childhood. So mom or dad would hold us or not yell at us, or someone would pay attention to us. And a deeper question then becomes about our guilt and shame or fear. Like, whose shame or fear am I carrying? Does that belong to me alone? And if so, where did I pick that up from? Why did I adapt that? Or is it societal conditions from grade school, from other traumatized children being more in our eyes than they are? Or is it generational? Probably it's a combination of all of it on some level. But reflecting, what do I believe about myself? What do I believe about my right to be here and my right to show up and to feel pleasure and to actually feel bliss and to be powerful? Marianne Williamson says, it does not serve the world to suppress your power. Who are you not to be powerful? You are a child of the divine. You are the divine. Who are you not to be powerful? It does not help the world, you playing small. So healing the Shakti, healing the feminine, begins when we reclaim these parts, these exiled parts. We each have parts. That's parts work. Internal family systems parts work. So there's parts of us that have been exiled for different reasons. And so we need to return to the innocence, to the erotic innocence, to our emotional intelligence, returning to our wild selves. When we were children, we hopefully didn't really care too much about what the external world thought. We would just play on the playground and naked and wild and free and uninhibited. We need to return to that wildness. That's ourself. Reclaiming the prana, the breath of life, the life force. Reclaiming the tejas, the inner flame that guides and illuminates the path in front of us and that brings light into the darkness. And the ojas, it's that nectar that makes us feel radiant and glow. It gives us that glow. That's what ojas does. When prana, tejas, and ojas are together, we glow, we radiate, we know what our path is, and we see the path forward and we go and bring it out. So reclaim your prana, tejas, and ojas. Reclaim your Mahavidyas inside yourself and offer them back to yourself, and then offer them to your beloved if you're in a relationship, and then offer them to your family and your community, and then to the whole world. And stay rooted in yourself. The winds of change are going to blow, and sometimes they're very gentle. Sometimes it's a pretty fierce storm. Sometimes it's a hurricane or tornado that's just going to uproot everything. Can you stay rooted in yourself as these winds of change blow so that the circumstances of life cannot uproot you? And can you be humble like a blade of grass? Though, even if there's a tornado, the oak tree may get uprooted, but the blade of grass, being so humble, just surrenders and it's still there. And the sun comes out and it grows even more. Allowing those roots, that foundation of Shakti, of wisdom, of the wisdom goddesses to be embodied into yourself through breath, through movement, through play, through erotic innocence, through emotional intelligence, through your spiritual practices. We talked last week about different Ayurvedic practices that can be done on a daily basis to really help embody that. So that applies here. And let the masculine, let Shiva, let the world, let the universe feel you in your radiant embodied fullness, your awakened embodied divine self. This is what the world needs. And I'm not saying that we need to swing the pendulum from a patriarchal dominant society to Shakti dominant. They need to work together as Shiva and Shakti, divine masculine, divine feminine, in unity and harmony. And it's only when that happens that we're going to get in an enlightened society. And when we remember that, we remember ourselves. We remember that Shakti was never separate from Shiva. Shiva was never separate from Shakti. We were never actually lacking anything. We just forgot. We had I-amnesia. We forgot who we are. And you always will be, you always are the dance of life itself. Om Para Shaktiye Namaha. Om Aim Hrim Klim Chamundaye Viche Namo Namaha. Om Shiva Shakti Karupinye Namaha. May the divine feminine, may Parashakti awaken fully in every heart. So her, she, Shakti, and Shiva, the divine masculine, may forever dance as one to the one song, the universe. Om Parashakti Namaha. Thank you for joining me this week. Next week we will discuss and explore the sacred masculine Shiva and deep dive into that union to complete this series of conscious relationship, Shiva and Shakti. Namaste.